In 1902, the United States made a pivotal move. It began formally commissioning dentists into the military. While that might sound bureaucratic, it was actually a deeply symbolic moment in the history of healthcare. This decision signaled that oral health was essential to military readiness and, by extension, national strength. But even more than that, it acknowledged that dental care, once viewed as separate from medical care, was now integral to the health of the whole person. This cultural reframing of this move was important too. Many of the religious and medical communities saw it as a fulfillment of the Christian duty to heal. The idea of the body as a temple gained traction, again, clean, well maintained, and fit for service. Caring for soldiers' teeth wasn't just about comfort, it was a moral commitment to dignity and wholeness. And this blending of service, spirituality, and structure is a pattern we'll see again and again in the evolution of clinical systems. Commissioning dentists laid the groundwork for what would become federally supported, morally grounded medical infrastructure, a precursor to how we think of clinical engineering today. Engineers like those dentists are brought into service not just for function, but for safety, for duty, and the belief that technology can protect what matters most. To understand why the commissioning of dentists in 1902 was such a significant development, we need to look at the broader social and political context. First, Theodore Roosevelt had just become president, bringing with him a wave of progressive reform energy. His administration emphasized discipline, structure, and public service, values that would soon ripple across military and medical institutions. Second, the Great Coal Strike of 1902 disrupted the economy, exposing the vulnerability of national systems to labor unrest and health related absenteeism. This highlighted the urgent need for stability and strength, not just in industry, but in the bodies of those who serve the country, both militarily and medically. And finally, the US was entering a period of military and civil service reform. The military was being modernized, new roles like surgeons, nurses, and now dentists were being formalized as essential components of organized federal care. These reforms weren't only about logistics, they carried moral weight. Commissioned service was framed as sacred duty, and the professionals who entered military ranks were expected to combine technical excellence with ethical responsibility. So when dentists were commissioned in 1902, it wasn't just about teeth. It was about extending the values of discipline, healing, and public trust into every corner of federal health service. And those same values, precision, service, reliability, are exactly what clinical engineers inherit today. Again, in 1902, for the first time in U.S. history, dentists were officially commissioned into the military. This act might seem simple on the surface, but it represented major milestones in how we viewed both health and service. First, it was a formal recognition of oral health as vital to military readiness. The assumption had always been that a healthy body was necessary for a strong soldier, but this was the moment when the military acknowledged that oral pain, infection, and hygiene could seriously compromise performance, morale, and even life expectancy. Second, this move was part of a broader professionalization of healthcare. Just as medicine had become more organized with licensing boards, formal training programs, and hospital standards, dentistry was now being integrated into national systems of care. And finally, this transition into military ranks gave dentistry a new layer of moral and civic significance. So dentists weren't just technicians, they were now medical officers with duties of protection, prevention, and dignity. Their work served both body and country. Um, and this is a model of service, technical, ethical, and structured. This would set a precedent for later professions like clinical engineering, where trust in equipment, accuracy, and consistent standards is just as vital to readiness and safety as it was in the field hospitals of 1902. As we said, that 1902 commissioning of dentists wasn't only a bureaucratic change, it was a deeply influenced move by religious and cultural values about health care and the body. Religious leaders, particularly within Christian traditions, actively supported the expansion of medical roles. They believed that to heal the sick was to follow in the example of Christ, and that caring for the physical body was part of a spiritual service. Oral health, in particular, was framed as more than hygiene. It was seen as honoring the temple of the soul. Scripture often describes the body as sacred. The dental care became a visible, accessible way to demonstrate that reverence. And this language gave moral legitimacy to federal medical reform. Healthcare was not only a national obligation, it keeps soldiers and citizens fit. It was a moral one. It reflected character, discipline, and collective responsibility. This theology of the body influenced how we built medical institutions and how we still structure systems today. Clinical engineers, like those early dentists, care for the infrastructure of healing. They maintain the systems that allow us to treat the body as sacred by making care much safer, more reliable, and, as always, ethically grounded. So, what else did the commissioning of the dentist in 1902 provide? Well, it provides a model for how healthcare roles evolve in tandem with technological expansion. So, as tools became more essential to care, whether dental instruments or early diagnostic devices, so too did the need for specialists who could use, manage, and maintain them. This trend gave rise to what we now recognize as support systems in medicine, whether it's record keeping, sterilization teams, or early biomed technicians. Those roles emerged to manage the growing complexity of these medical environments. Dentists in the military were among the first professionals expected to balance clinical skill with technical responsibility. Later, clinical engineers would step in to a similar stewardship role. As more of medicine became technology driven, someone had to take responsibility for the ongoing calibration, safety, maintenance, and performance efforts, not just for individual tools, but for entire systems of care. And this way, engineers became spiritual successors to these early medical pioneers, trusted behind the scenes professionals who keep the promise of care running smoothly, ethically, and effectively. So their work, like the dentists before them, is grounded not just in utility, but in accountability, service, and trust. Let's see if we can summarize all of this. Okay, so the year 1902, it represents a major turning point in the history of military and national healthcare. By formally commissioning dentists, the US government not only expanded its medical workforce, it redefined what health meant in the military. This move acknowledged oral health care as essential to the whole body readiness, and no longer was dentistry peripheral. It was central to maintaining troop morale, combat effectiveness, and human dignity. It also reflected a deeper belief that every part of the body matters, not just for function, but for moral wholeness. But this was also a structural shift. Healthcare was being embedded more deeply into the federal systems, supported by policy, logistics, and public trust. It laid the foundation for how we now think of federated care systems, complete with specialized roles and the ethical expectations. And that's where clinical engineering comes in. Not at this point in time, but much later, right? So today's engineers are not simply technicians. They are stewards of care, ensuring that health systems are safe, reliable, and morally defensible. Like those early military dentists, they serve quietly behind the scenes, helping to uphold a national promise, and that every person's health deserves structured attention, technical excellence, and ethical respect.